Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, is more than just a terrible movie. It's a disgusting, cynical disaster that tries to replicate the hype of a cut that wasn't worth releasing to begin with, all because of the indulgence, impulses, and delusions of one of the worst storytellers of this generation. As of this video, Netflix will release the second part in April, and I guarantee you with my bottom dollar, it'll be just about as self-important and ostentatious as this.
Boy, no, I hate being right all the time.
How do you even start a review for a movie like this? Well, let's just get this out of the way first. Rebel Moon Part 2, The SCARGIVER, is not a bad movie. It's an atrocity to humanity. It's one of the worst things to ever happen in human existence since the invention of TikTok. It sucks worse than a Dirt Devil vacuum cleaner. I don't even know what to even say at this point. It's so baneful, atrocious, horrible, pernicious, deleterious, abysmal, all the other adjectives that I can possibly describe this thing, that I can't even... It's defeated me. It is literally defeated me. It is so bad that I can't even get angry at it anymore. And believe me, I've been frustrated at a lot of things, but when it comes to another movie by Zack Snyder, I'm just like, this man has to go. I don't want him making movies in Hollywood anymore. I can't understand how he keeps getting opportunity and opportunity to keep making his torturous movies before and after his biggest embarrassment of his entire career being the DCEU. He knows what a movie is and what a cool shot might look like, but he has no idea how to make one. And when he has an idea or takes inspiration from other pillars of media, he has no earthly clue as to why those ideas or inspirations function so well in the first place. He cannot write characters, stories, world building, dialogue, not even action scenes. He is what I consider to be ineptitude to the fourth power. So, with that being said, let's finally talk about the movie. And to cut to the chase, here's your first spoiler. The movie is a 0. A big, fat, steaming, hunking 0. The problem that I have with the sequel are practically almost identical with the first one. The storytelling is as vacant as the inside of Zack Snyder's cranium. The characterization is incorporeal and incoherent despite having a couple quality actors trying all they can muster with pitiful material. The world building shows locations that look cool but are never explored or add up to anything. Their mechanics are just about as confused as an indecisive child in a candy store. The CGI looks worse than a movie from the modern sci-fi channel. The editing has no idea how to end elongated scenes or even how to cut them, period. The dialogue is both disjointed and overwritten with ghastly exposition, and the action scenes couldn't be more stilted or overindulgent. So yeah, that's the review. If you guys want to leave this video right now and go on about your day, I'd be perfectly okay with it. I wouldn't blame you because I just gave you everything that you need to know about this film. But for the valiant ones that want to stick around for some spoilers, believe me, we got a whole lot of insidiousness to get through. So after Kora and her galactic pals defeat Admiral Atticus Noble, or so they think, they arrive to the harvesting village of the moon Veldt, alerting everybody that the Imperium will arrive in 5 days' time for their requested grain and flour. With a plan to use the grain against them as sand blockades, Kora and her allies prepare their final stand against a resurrected Atticus Noble and his fleet. And yeah, that's pretty much as far as plot synopsis goes. Because for a movie that has a bloated 2-hour-long running time, hardly anything actually happens in this film. Want to know what makes up for the 2-hour runtime? Well, let me tell you. Endless waves of slow-mo shots during action scenes. In fact, the entire second half of this movie is technically a gigantic action sequence, a horrifically and insultingly scripted action set piece, multiple scenes of our characters hurling expository dialogue, and not one, not two, not three, but 4 slow-motion montages of our heroes harvesting and milling grain, all of which are accompanied by this generic Celtic hymn that is meant to be inspiring and uplifting, but honestly prove that Zack Snyder has no idea how to write a song. But perhaps the most inexcusable moment in this movie that just goes to show you how egregious of a character and story writer Zack is a moment in which all of the characters sit in a round table discussion and one by one spout their entire backstory and their motivation to fight the Imperium. Because when we saw the first movie, we had no idea what these characters are or what their backstory was, aside from buttloads of exposition. But when we got to General Titus talking about his past and showing his backstory in slow motion, I thought to myself, no, they're honestly not doing this. And sure enough, they were. The movie spends 10 agonizing minutes through the most horrific exposition delivered as if the director was showcasing a PowerPoint presentation about every single character as to what they are and what they dealt with in the past. And almost all of them have the same freaking backstory. Everything was good until the Imperium came. I lost all my loved ones and those I respected, and that made me sad. Now I've decided to fight against the Imperium to help a colony that all they do is harvest grain. The first of these 2 nonsensical examples are as follows. You know the Asian character with the blades? Her name is Nemesis. She lost her children to the Imperium, and with the strength of her ancestors teaching her how to fight, cuts off her own arms, because Zack is an edgelord, to wear these cybernetic gauntlets that really don't do anything aside from helping her hold these swords that are so hot they will burn your skin, which, as we find out later on in the movie, can be only solved just by wrapping cloth around the handle. That's great, Zack. Awesome job. For the second one, remember when I referenced a character that turned out to be a prince who spent most of his life being a slave? Well, that would be the character Turok. In his tragic Shakespearean backstory, his father died, and before he left to find refuge on a distant part of the galaxy, his mom, in order to preserve the bloodline for the kingdom, commits suicide. Why? They could just go to another part of the galaxy together that the Imperium have never gone to. It's a galaxy. They can go anywhere. Why do you do this to me, Zack? What am I supposed to make of this? And of course, we cannot go without another monotonous monologue from our walking exposition dump truck named Kora. For her third expository scene involving her backstory, she goes into detail about the death of the royal family. Aside from the fact that the entire assassination is a blatant reference to Julius Caesar's assassination, in which Belisarius and all of his friends go over to kill the king and queen by using daggers while dressed in togas. You can't make this up. He instructs Kora to shoot the young princess, and once that happens, he frames her for the death of the royal family. And upon this betrayal, she escapes the dreadnought and leaves in a ship to a distant planet. So, let me get this straight. She knows that Belisarius killed her entire family as a little girl, and from that point on, he brings her in as his adoptive daughter and raises her to become a soldier. Why would Belisarius train her in the Imperium to such a degree to where she is so battle-hardened that she never misses a shot even once and is able to escape a dreadnought if his goal was to betray her? In fact, why did he even need Kora in the room to begin with? And if he were to frame her for the crime? How did he get away with regicide if she never used several knives to stab the king and queen when all she used was a gun? Moreover, why is there no huge alarm raised or soldiers prepared to execute her when she tries to escape the ship? The thing that also astonishes me is that when Kora lays it all out to her boyfriend, after they had sex, of course, that she was the one who was ordered by Belisarius to murder the princess, he is totally unfazed by this. In fact, nobody cares how big of a deal this is because the princess is supposed to be the one to bring prosperity to the next generation after a long histories of wars. And no one is concerned that Kora committed this heinous crime and is putting the entire colony's existence in jeopardy just because, she's the main character. There's plenty of scenes like that, but there are also scenes that could have worked in a much better movie, such as a scene in which the townsfolk are offering gifts to our heroes for all the help that they brought to them. This would have been a good scene if we actually had gotten to know anything about these characters aside from exposition being shoved in front of our faces as to why these heroes are so awesome, or if the characters had time to know each other. These characters met each other over the course of a few days, and after 4 days of harvesting and milling, we suddenly cut to a scene in which a side character is bringing gifts to the warriors while exchanging information about their attributes, their characteristics, and what they mean to Veldt. Geez, Zach, if only we had more time in character development and not a reliance on exposition to identify with these characters. Now that I think about it, I've never asked myself this question up until this point. But why is Veldt so important to the Imperium? What makes him so valuable to the point of the Imperium threatening the existence of the entire colony if they don't give them the requested grain? I mean, it's not like this moon colony is the only one in the galaxy to produce grain. Surely there will be more colonies or planets that exist that can do a much better job of harvesting and negotiating. After figuring out for myself, the answer is there is no reason. There isn't a single reason as to why the Imperium would waste their time bullying this tribe when Veldt has made it abundantly clear that they can't create enough food supplies to not only give to them, but to eat for themselves. But just when you thought I got into the nitty-gritty as to why the film is bad, oh man, this right here is where the craptastic plot brings home the bacon. You know that the whole plot of the film hinges on this colony being under the barrel of a gun if it doesn't harvest grain in 10 or 11 days, right? Here's how the rest of the film goes. In the first act, there was a guy who we have next to no reason to care about sharing communications with his commander. Why would the commander share information to his corporal as to what day they'll arrive when he's heard from Noble that he knows, for some reason, that Kora, the most wanted individual in the galaxy, according to the Imperium, is on Veldt? Had the commander not told his corporal as to when they were going to arrive, or had asked him a question relating to his men who all died by Kora's hands, the colony is done for, and the movie would be pretty different. The colony has 5 days left, and Titus replies to them that they have to harvest the grain in 3 out of the 5 days, leaving them 2 more days for them to prepare their defenses, train, and concoct a plan before the Imperium make their arrival. Since it's said that it takes half a cycle around a planet just to harvest all of the grain, which we have no idea how long that actually lasts, after doing it in 3 days, it just makes you ask yourself, what the heck have these peasants been doing since the 5 or 6 days that Kora was gone? Screwing around and waiting for their inevitable demise? Their plan, since their enemy is so desperate for their grain, is to use them as barricades, which the bad guys also notice through their infrared scanners on their ships. But what the colony doesn't realize is that the Imperium's true motivation is to arrest Kora, and they have all the leverage they need to bring her in and to take the grain away, because Atticus Noble, for the first time in this godforsaken movie, is willing to leave the civilians unharmed and will take the grain on the condition that Kora goes along with them. Seems like a pretty reasonable bargain. At that point, the movie would be pretty much over, right? This is where the fun begins, and by fun, I mean sheer torture. After Kora agrees, Gunnar, her boyfriend, presumes that Noble is lying, which he isn't, and decides to get some of his villagers killed by igniting the signal and starting the fight against the Imperium. Nice job, nitwit. A battle ensues, and plot armor is rampant for our heroes as they avoid gunfire like they're mosquitoes. And after defeating the first wave, just when they thought they've won, the Imperium launches their tanks and ends up shooting them and their homes, which happened to be protected by the grain and flour that they needed so badly. So much for that, I guess. But if all of that wasn't stupid enough, in the final 15 minutes, Admiral Noble, because he's so cartoonishly and one-dimensionally diabolical, turns to his commander and he says, we don't need the grain anymore, let's just bomb the village. I mean, hey, if we do happen to hit our soldiers, at least we have less mouths to feed. So, what you're telling me is that we wasted over 4 hours on this central conflict in which the Imperium are desperately scouring for food supplies from this small colony for nothing. They could have just bombed the village the whole freaking time. You know what, Zach? Write a book. I'm sure you'll do great at writing books more than you do movies. Just write a book. Go ahead. I'm sure you'll do fine. And also, just something I really want to point out to you guys. I find it particularly hilarious that this technologically advanced empire has robots, laser weapons, holograms, and cosmic energy that are being drawn from interdimensional space gods. Don't ask, they don't even bother explaining it, so I don't know why I should either. Would also have to rely on coal and 19th century technology to operate a spaceship. And they also happen to have the most inept security in the galaxy, where anybody can enter the most important areas just so they can do something like detonate bombs. Speaking of technology, remember the plot hole that I talked about in part 1? It is revealed in the movie that the Imperium troopers have K2SO-like androids that are used for manual labor. Why not use them to fight for the Imperium, you ask? Well, it's because one of the soldiers informs his commander that once the king was slain, the robots laid down their weapons and refused to fight in loyalty to the king. Then why doesn't this technologically advanced infantry and empire reprogram these droids to fight for them? You expect me to believe that this hyper-advanced empire that has conquered the galaxy didn't honestly think to themselves, man, you know what should really dismantle the rebels? We should take some of these androids that we use for manual labor and just reprogram them to help fight for us. We can use them as infantry, we can use them as kamikaze pilots, we can use them as suicide bombers. Nah, never mind, that's too easy. No wonder they're gonna lose in part 2. Yeah. Guess what happens? Just when our heroes have their backs up against the wall and prepared to die, all of a sudden, the robot from part 1, who's named Jimmy, by the way, like it matters, superhero lands on the battlefield, annihilates an entire enemy platoon, destroys the tanks and the people inside them. And also, he's impenetrable from enemy gunfire, which he never was in the first movie. Which, by the way, is something that he should have done at the very beginning of the battle. But he didn't, because instead, he sat around spectating and not wanting to help the Veldt rebels for the simple reason that they are guaranteed to lose, even though one of them is a young girl that he befriended in part 1. What a great character. You want to know the worst part about all of this? This movie was originally set up to be a 2-part cinematic event. This director has the cojones to sequel bait not just to part 3, but has serious ambitions of wanting to turn these movies into a 6-part saga. Zack? No one's falling for this anymore. Nobody is going to waste their time watching another installment to this franchise you want to create. All of your characters are horribly brain dead and lifeless archetypes. The script shows that you don't have the ability to write a postcard, let alone a story. Your reliance on bleak color palettes and radio blurs is absolutely hideous, and your themes are poorly realized. America is already in the bad shape that it is in right now, and people who watch Rebel Moon Part 2, The SCARGIVER, will further initiate the destruction of Western civilization. I can't even imagine Netflix trying to justify making a third installment for this abominable franchise. Then again, they did distribute Cuties, so anything is possible. Because this is a movie so bad, it could ruin careers. Aside from BVS, Justice League, and Sucker Punch, these two movies are the ne plus ultra of his cinematic career as a director and a writer. He can't get any worse than this, can he? I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I understand as film reviewers and as aspiring critics that we should help filmmakers improve and reach their fullest potential. But when you have a director that makes travesty after travesty, never learning anything or accepting any kind of feedback to heart about the error of their ways, something needs to be done. Zack needs either a writer or an editor who can be the parent to tell him, no, Zack, you cannot have this slow-mo action scene. Zack, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you writing it like this? Or if that doesn't happen, may we pray to the movie gods to spare the rest of humanity in Hollywood by stopping this man from ever making another film in Hollywood ever again. Will Zack Snyder make good movies like years before? Quoth Luke Nukem. Nevermore.